Not every legendary Pokémon is exactly the stuff of legends. Take Koraidon and Miraidon for example. Both are legendary Pokémon, but Paldea has no myths or legends about them. Hell, the vast majority of the Paldean population doesn't even know they exist. That can definitely not be said about Ho-Oh. Johto loves this thing like Game Freak loves Charizard. It's the central Pokémon in a ton of the region's stories and myths. Over the course of the region's history, several towers have been dedicated to it, with originally one standing in Goldenrod City, which was torn down to make room for the Radio Tower. It then moved to Ecruteak City and became the Bell Tower, previously known as the Tin Tower, where Ho-Oh would perch until the other tower in the city, the Brass Tower, burned down, causing that tower's resident Lugia to relocate to the Whirl Islands and Ho-Oh to leave the Bell Tower permanently for an unknown destination, seemingly never to return. All this stuff strongly suggests Ho-Oh is an extremely special, and dare I say legendary Pokémon, of which you would assume only one exists. But here's the thing, is that actually true? Is Ho-Oh truly as special as Johto seems to believe? Or did they dictate several towers to a glorified pigeon of which entire flocks exist somewhere? That's what we're gonna find out, as we'll take a look at every inch of the Pokémon world as seen in the games and count how many Ho-Oh truly live on the same Poké-Earth. Let's start simple with Generation 2 and a bit of 4. As you would expect, one Ho-Oh is found in all Johto-based games: Gold, Silver, Crystal, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And although its role in the story varies per game, that doesn't really matter for the purpose of this video. Each of these games tells the story of the journey of Ethan, Chris or Lara a little differently. But one thing is for certain, they cannot all happen on the same planet. Meaning that each of these games' Pokémon worlds features only one Ho-Oh in Johto. Can't really be a surprise, but hey, we have to start somewhere. But while these games themselves are not connected to each other, they are connected to another Pokémon game. Gold, Silver and Crystal are sequels to Red and Blue, while Heart Gold and Soul Silver follow up Fire Red and Leaf Green. Ho-Oh obviously didn't appear in Red and Blue, but it was actually added in the remakes, residing on a lonely island in the Sevi Islands archipelago. The island of Naval Rock could only be reached by obtaining a mystic ticket through mystery gift events, and would allow the ferry in Vermilion City to take you to the, I assume, temporary home of not just Ho-Oh but also Lugia. This exact same event also appears in Pokemon Emerald, where Naval Rock can be reached from Lily Cove City instead. So one thing is very clear from the get-go. Despite Ho-Oh appearing in both Emerald and Fire Red and Leaf Green, this is 100% the same Ho-Oh. It lives on the same island, is the same level, has the exact same moves, same abilities, same everything. But is it also the same Ho-Oh that would later be summoned at Bell Tower in Heart Gold and Soul Silver? After all, like I said, Heart Gold and Soul Silver are direct sequels to the Gen 1 remakes, so if truly only one Ho-Oh exists, this would be the same one. And this is where it gets complicated. As mentioned before, Ho-Oh plays a different role in the story of each of the Johto games. In Gold it's the box legendary, and thus appears before the end of the game. While in Silver it's a post-game legendary, which accounts for you having become champion and thus ups its level from 40 to 70 and gives it a stronger moveset. And here's the interesting part. Ho-Oh as it appears in Silver is exactly the same level and has the same moveset as the Ho-Oh on Naval Rock. Recover, Fire Blast, Sunny Day and Swift. Well, it is impossible to explain the inconsistency between the several Johto titles without diving into out-of-game talk, with balancing being very clearly the reason for it. I'm willing to cut Game Freak some slack here and say that the fact that the movesets are identical suggests to me the intention here is to make clear these are the same Ho-Oh. Red, Leaf, Brandon or May potentially catching Ho-Oh in Fire Red, Leaf Green and Emerald doesn't really mess with the timeline of events here either, seeing as this is an event Pokemon, meaning it is entirely optional and therefore completely possible that the Johto games are set in a timeline where the Ho-Oh was never caught on Naval Rock, allowing for it to reappear at the Bell Tower. Okay, that's that whole mess settled, but it doesn't mean we're out of the woods yet in regards to Generation 3. Ho-Oh also makes a high-profile appearance in Pokemon Colosseum after all, which may be a spin-off, but has connectivity to the mainline games, and without a reason to consider it set in a different universe, I believe it should be taken as set on the same Pokemon planet. Both Colosseum and its sequel, XD Guild of Darkness, take place in the region of Orre, which is based on Arizona, presumably making it relatively close to both Unova and Alola, part of the same country at least. Ho-Oh only appears in the first title, and while it isn't a huge part of the plot, it is also not an event or afterthought in any other way, like it was on Naval Rock. Here, Ho-Oh appears at the ending of the game, using Sacred Fire to prevent the villains from escaping the scene, meaning that the events of Colosseum don't happen as they do if Ho-Oh doesn't appear, making its appearance here irrefutably canon. Should the story of Ho-Oh and Orre end here, we would be left guessing, but fortunately, this exact Ho-Oh can be obtained yourself after beating the game, by defeating all 100 trainers in Mount Battle, in battle mode, using your main game team after purifying all 48 Shadow Pokémon. Yeah, that's a hassle. But the reward is worth it, I'd say. A level 70 Ho-Oh with the moves Recover, Fire Blast, Sunny Day and Swift. Where have I seen that before? So yeah, this Orre-based Ho-Oh once again has the exact same level and moveset as not only the Silver Ho-Oh, but also the Naval Rock Ho-Oh, suggesting that this too is the same individual. And while that may all sound a little convenient, like Ho-Oh is just randomly appearing everywhere it's needed somehow, it really all checks out when you think about it. The entire story of Ho-Oh states it used to reside permanently in Johto, but left approximately 150 years ago when the brass tower burned down and wasn't seen again in the region, strongly suggesting it left the vicinity entirely. It would be entirely feasible for it to show up in Naval Rock and Orre during this time, especially seeing as we don't know how long it has been residing in these locations for. It should also be noted that while Kanto is Johto's direct neighbor, Ho-Oh isn't actually found in mainland Kanto, but instead in the Sevi Islands, which further adds distance between the region it's revered in and its current location, making it very much possible no one in Johto even knows it was to be found not too far from its home. And even though Ho-Oh's appearance in Orre is undeniable thanks to its inclusion in the story, it being caught by Wes, the main character of Colosseum, is completely optional. By the time the sequel rolls around, XD Gale of Darkness, Ho-Oh is nowhere to be found, despite its apparent home of Mount Battle reappearing, suggesting it has already left the region for new lands, potentially Naval Rock. Ho-Oh's journey doesn't end here though. While it would appear in several spin-offs around this time, like the Mystery Dungeon, Trosai and Rumble series, these games feature zero interconnectivity with the mainline games and are set in worlds that are quite obviously not the same one as the main titles. And thus, these Ho-Oh are not to be taken into consideration here, they exist on entirely different planets. However, the Orre titles aren't the only spin-offs that feature Ho-Oh, and draw the suggestion they do take place on the same Pokemon planet as the mainline games. That also applies to the Pokemon Ranger series. Nothing that happens here contradicts the main games, and there is interconnectivity between the trilogy of Ranger titles and Diamond and Pearl, with the Manaphy Egg as the most prominent example. And that means I believe the appearance of Ho-Oh in Pokemon Ranger Guardian Signs should be taken very, very seriously. Without diving too deep into the events of the game, Ho-Oh is tied to a location known as the Rainbow Days in this game. The people of Oblivia, the setting of the game, believe the days to be located in Kokona Village, showing Johto isn't the only place in the Pokemon world to honor Ho-Oh. However, this turns out to be a fake, with the real days located under the sea floor. After the player obtains the Rainbow Grill and places it on the real days, it rises up into the sky and Ho-Oh appears, challenging the player to a battle. After successfully capturing it, they can summon Ho-Oh with the use of a Ranger sign, and use it to break down the barrier surrounding the Sky Fortress, the base of operations of the evil team. Point being, just like in Orre, Ho-Oh's appearance here is part of the story and not optional. What is very unfortunate though is that we know next to nothing about when the Ranger games take place in the chronological order of events in the Pokemon world. One would assume it all happens around the same time frame as the Gen 4 games, judging by the connectivity and the fact they're literally set in that generation, which would then make it so this game takes place after the events in Johto, meaning this will be the second Ho-Oh in the world. However, we cannot say that for certain. There is no concrete evidence as to when the events of Guardian Signs transpire, meaning it is also entirely plausible Oblivia is another location Ho-Oh visited during the 150 years it spent away from Johto. We simply don't know, and with the Ranger series pretty much dead and buried, we will probably never know. But while the Ranger series ended with Guardian Signs, Ho-Oh's story doesn't end here. while would be absent in the mainline Gen 5 games, it would make an appearance in Pokemon Dream Radar, an AR game that is somehow still connected to the mainline games in some bizarre fashion. Not only can you send some of the Pokemon you caught here to Pokemon Black and White 2, Professor Burnett also makes a high-profile reappearance later down the line in Alola, suggesting that somehow, somewhere, Dream Radar is canon to the Pokemon world. Sort of. That said, Ho-Oh only appears in this game in the post-game and only when you have a copy of Heart Gold slotted into your DS, so I don't think its appearance flying through your room should really be accounted for here. Same thing with Pokemon Go. Despite connectivity to the main games, the setting of Go is very much not the main Pokemon world. But okay, let's get back to games that are set on the main Pokemon Earth, like X and Y, which don't feature Ho-Oh, or Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which do feature Ho-Oh, but set off a slew of appearances that are very much not meant to be taken literally. Hoopus Portals, Ultra Space Wilds and Dynamax Adventures all make Ho-Oh available in Gen 6, 7 and 8. But all play with different dimensions and timelines as explanations for how these Ho-Oh appear, meaning we should not be taking these into account for our total Ho-Oh count, which is currently still only one confirmed, impressively enough. However, I don't think it will be able to hold as we go into the next game in the series to feature Ho-Oh, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. This game has Ramona Spark as your local find every random legendary area. But unlike the previous 3, this one doesn't utilize timeline and dimension mechanics and instead, as Professor Oak explains, lures the legendaries from all over the world to its location, meaning the Ho-Oh we catch here comes from presumably Johto, but at least somewhere on the same Earth. And that, my friends, means there is more than one Ho-Oh. Assuming BDSP are set in the same timeline as Heart Gold and Soul Silver at least, which we have no reason to suggest is incorrect. And the key to that extra Ho-Oh is Jasmine, gym leader of Olivine City and guest star of Sinnoh contests. In the Johto remakes, she can be found talking to Erica near the fountain in Celadon City, expressing she is planning to enter a contest in Sinnoh soon, indicating Heart Gold and Soul Silver take place before the Sinnoh games, where Jasmine can occasionally join for a contest with her Steelix Rusty. And that means the Ho-Oh lured to Ramona Spark cannot be the same one that is deified in Johto, as we end up catching it in the Johto games. Now, I will admit, if you really wanted to keep the counter at 1, you could. You could say BDSP are sequels to Soul Silver, but not Heart Gold, as Ho-Oh is an optional post-game capture in that game, meaning Ethan or Lara catching it there does not necessarily have to happen canonically. And you could of course always say BDSP are not meant to be set on the same Poke Earth as Heart Gold and Soul Silver. There is no evidence they necessarily are after all, just like there is no evidence they are not. But I don't know, personally I feel like in the absence of evidence we should assume the worlds are the same, and the idea of BDSP following up only Soul Silver and not Heart Gold is a little ridiculous to me. So yeah, I'm gonna call it, this is a different Ho-Oh. We don't know where it's from, Johto is suggested but not confirmed, but I don't believe it is the same bird as we find on top of the bell tower. It does add a new question though. If it isn't from Johto, where does this Ramona Spark Ho-Oh come from? Like with so many things in the Pokemon universe, there is no set in stone answer, but one potential answer was delivered to our doorstep by the next mainline Pokemon game, Scarlet and Violet. Ever since the Indigo Disc section of the DLC, Ho-Oh can be caught thanks to the special candy of Snacksworth, who explains he saw Ho-Oh once as a young fella, which would mean about 40 to 50 years ago in the southwest of Paldea near the waterfalls. Spoiler alert, that's in the South Province Area 4, a place you can now also find it with the necessary treat. Now, this is a very interesting tale in two ways, because at first sight it could kinda tie into both of the two Ho-Oh we now know exist. After all, Snackworth's initial encounter took place, like I said, presumably about 40 to 50, maybe 30 years ago, which would predate Gold and Silver, meaning that this encounter in Paldea could very well be set in Ho-Oh's 150-year absence. But later, we can also make it appear in the current day, although, to be fair, I don't think it is outright confirmed to be the same Ho-Oh that Snackworth once encountered. It's very strongly implied, obviously, but not confirmed, meaning that technically it is possible that the original Ho-Oh Snacksworth saw is the Johto Ho-Oh, while the one we catch later is probably the Ramana Spark Ho-Oh. Far from confirmed, but it's fun to think about. Anyway, as you can probably already tell from my wording, I believe the Ramana Spark Ho-Oh and Paldea Ho-Oh are one and the same. And the reasons for that are quite simple and should probably be familiar by now. Same level, same moveset, same everything. Plus, the Ramana Spark Ho-Oh is an optional catch, meaning it is entirely plausible that Scarlet and Violet are set in a timeline where Lucas and Dawn never caught it, assuming they're set in the same timeline to begin with. And that means that keeping the entire mess that is the Pokemon timeline and continuity in mind, the grand total of Ho-Oh in the universe of the games is at least 2. It could be more, depending on what you count and what post-game events are meant to be taken as canon, but it's at least 2. That is only the game canon though. When you start factoring the anime and other media in, it becomes an all-out mess. For completionist's sake, I do want to quickly mention that although Ho-Oh also appears in New Pokemon Snap on Switch, I don't think it is correct to consider that game as canon to the mainline titles. It does have strong ties to the anime universe though, which has some loose ties to the game continuity, but it's all a bit too unclear and messy for me to consider canon. So yeah, that's a wrap on counting Ho-Oh. Do you agree with my findings, or do you have some different theories of your own? And which legendary Pokemon should I tackle next? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.